Do you remember the different color twins? Once, many years ago, in a small town where life moved slowly and quietly, something remarkable happened inside the walls of a modest hospital. A young couple had waited patiently for the birth of their children. They knew they were expecting twins, and their hearts were already full of love. Yet nothing could have prepared them for the moment when the doctor gently placed the two newborns in their mother's arms. One baby girl had skin as fair as milk, with the softest hint of golden fuzz on her tiny head. Her eyes, though not yet fully open, carried a promise of hazel light. She was delicate, almost glowing against the white blanket that wrapped her. The other baby girl was just as beautiful, yet completely different. Her skin was warm and rich in tone, with a crown of soft, dark curls. Her tiny fists stretched toward the world with strength, as if declaring her arrival boldly. The room fell into a hush. Even the nurses paused, for in that single moment, everyone realized they were witnessing something rare, something extraordinary. The twins were not identical. They were not even what most people would expect fraternal twins to be. They were a living contrast. Two perfect little souls born of the same parents, yet carrying the colors of the world in their skin. The mother wept, not from confusion, but from awe. The father kissed both of their foreheads, whispering promises of love that would never end. And as the sun rose outside the hospital window, two little lives began a story that would touch hearts far beyond the walls of that room. This was the beginning of Lucy and Lena. As the years passed, Lucy and Lena grew side by side, two little girls whose bond was stronger than any difference in appearance. From their very first steps, they filled their home with laughter and light. Lucy was the quieter one. She loved puzzles, picture books, and the calm comfort of arranging her toys neatly. There was always a gentleness about her, a softness in the way she looked at the world. Lena, on the other hand, was a burst of energy. She loved to run, to tumble, to laugh so loudly that it filled every corner of the house. Where Lucy was careful, Lena was bold. Where Lucy observed, Lena leaped. Their parents often marveled at the contrast. On the outside, the girls looked like opposites, one fair, one dark. Yet on the inside, they shared the same heart, the same laughter, the same unshakable love for each other. One quiet afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the curtains, Lucy carefully stacked her wooden blocks into a tall, proud tower. She held her breath as she placed the final block on top. But before she could admire her work, Lena came bouncing over with a mischievous grin. With a single playful swipe, she sent the tower crashing down. For a moment, Lucy's lips trembled, and it seemed she might cry. But then, seeing her sister's sparkling eyes, she let out a small laugh. Soon, both girls were giggling so hard that their mother had to put down her knitting to laugh with them. Their father, wanting to capture the memory, lifted his camera and clicked a photo, the image of two sisters so different, yet so perfectly the same. And in that laughter, their parents saw the truth, that love was not bound by appearances. Lucy and Lena were unique, yes, but more than that, they were inseparable. Their story was just beginning. When the twins turned 6, it was time for their very first day of school. At home, Lucy and Lena had never questioned their differences. To them, it was simple. They were sisters, they were best friends, and that was all that mattered. But stepping out into the wider world brought new eyes and new voices. That morning, Lucy clung tightly to her mother's hand, her hazel eyes wide with nerves. She worried about the crowd, the noise, the unknown faces. Lena, by contrast, pulled eagerly at her father's arm, bouncing on her toes with excitement. She wanted to run, to meet everyone, to see what this new adventure was all about. As they entered the playground, children stopped and stared. Some whispered, a few pointed. "Are they really twins?" one little boy asked aloud, his voice curious, not cruel. "How can one be light and one be dark?" Lucy lowered her gaze, feeling a strange heaviness in her chest. She had never thought of herself and Lena as unusual. But now, under all those eyes, she wasn't sure how to feel. Lena, however, stepped forward boldly. She smiled and announced, "Of course we're twins. We just look different, that's all. But she's my sister, and I'm hers." Her words carried a simple confidence that silenced the crowd. The teacher, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled warmly and called the girls over. She knelt down, took their hands, and said, "Every set of twins is special, and you two are very special indeed." Lucy's nerves softened as Lena squeezed her hand. The girls walked into class together, side by side, one cautious, one fearless. And though whispers would come and go over the years, that day taught them something important. Their bond was stronger than any question, any doubt, any difference. For the world might see them as unusual, but in their hearts, they were simply Lucy and Lena. By the time Lucy and Lena were 8 years old, they had settled into the rhythm of school life. They walked to class each morning with matching backpacks, their laughter echoing down the street. At home, nothing had changed. They were still inseparable. But at school, their differences often became the subject of curiosity. One afternoon in the cafeteria, as the twins sat side by side opening their lunches, 2 classmates joined them. The girls were friendly, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you really twins?" one of them asked. "Yes," Lena replied quickly, her voice cheerful and proud. "Born on the same day. Same mom, same dad. She's my sister." The other child tilted her head. "But how come you don't look the same? You're light and she's dark." Lucy's cheeks warmed. She lowered her eyes to her sandwich, unsure how to respond. But Lena leaned forward, her brown eyes sparkling with confidence. "Because we're special," she said simply. "We're different on the outside, but we're the same where it matters. Right, Lucy?" Lucy hesitated, then smiled softly. She nodded. "She's my best friend," she whispered. The girls across the table giggled, not out of meanness, but from the wonder of it all. "That's so cool," one of them said. "I wish I had a twin like that." For the rest of lunch, they shared stories, laughed together, and traded snacks. And though Lucy still felt shy under the questions, she was comforted by Lena's unwavering boldness. It was in moments like these that Lucy realized how much she leaned on her sister's strength. Lena's courage became a shield for them both. And though the world sometimes struggled to understand, their friendship with others slowly grew, built not on appearances, but on laughter, kindness, and the quiet magic of being themselves. Little by little, the whispers faded into smiles. And Lucy and Lena learned, sometimes the best way to answer questions was simply by living happily, side by side. The teenage years arrived, and with them came new challenges for Lucy and Lena. At 13, they were no longer just the twins. They were young women stepping into a world where appearance seemed to matter more than anything else. And for the first time, the differences between them felt heavier than before. Lucy, with her fair skin and soft blonde hair, blended easily with many of her classmates. People often assumed she belonged before she even spoke, but she didn't always feel she fit in. Her quiet nature made her shy in conversations, and she often felt overshadowed by louder voices. Lena, with her rich brown skin and radiant smile, carried herself with confidence. She loved being noticed, loved making friends, loved standing out. But with that attention came endless questions. Are you really sisters? Some would ask. Are you adopted? Others whispered. Are you sure you're even twins? Chai. Questions stung more now than they had in childhood. They were no longer innocent curiosities. They were sharp, edged with doubt. Lucy sometimes stayed silent, unsure of what to say. But Lena always answered, her voice steady. Yes, we're sisters. Yes, we're twins. We don't have to look the same to belong to each other. Still, when they went home at the end of the day, Lucy would sometimes sit quietly in her room, wondering why people struggled to see them as they truly were. She questioned herself, why she wasn't as bold as Lena, why the whispers bothered her so deeply. Lena would often find her there, close the door, and sit beside her. Don't listen to them, she'd say softly. We know who we are. That's enough. And though the world outside sometimes made them feel different, their bond inside those walls remained unshakable. Together, they carried each other. Through the stormy years of growing up, two different colors, two different spirits, yet one unbreakable heart. By the time Lucy and Lena reached their late teens, their bond was stronger than ever, but so were their differences. High school had taught them lessons, not just about subjects and exams, but about themselves. They were no longer little girls answering curious questions in the cafeteria. They were young women beginning to dream of the lives they wanted to live. Lucy had discovered a love for art. Her notebooks were filled with sketches of trees, faces, and little moments she noticed in the world around her. Drawing gave her peace, a way to express what words often couldn't. She dreamed quietly of becoming an illustrator, of telling stories through color and line. You're now looking at the Jungfrau in the Swiss Alps, standing at 4,158 meters. It's one of Europe's most iconic snow-covered peaks. From here, you can admire glaciers, valleys, and lakes, an unforgettable panoramic view. Riding the cogwheel, train to the top of Europe, is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Whether hiking in summer or skiing in winter, this is a paradise for nature lovers. Lena, meanwhile, found her passion in words and leadership. She loved writing essays, giving speeches, and organizing events at school. Her voice carried power, and she longed to use it to inspire others. She dreamed of becoming a journalist, of traveling the world, of telling stories that mattered. Though their paths were different, their late nights still belonged to each other. They studied side by side, shared snacks, and sometimes fell asleep mid-conversation, laughter still lingering in the air. Yet outside their room, people still struggled. To see them as simply Lucy and Lena. Teachers, classmates, even strangers continued to ask, "Are you really twins?" Sometimes the weight of those words threatened to overshadow their individual achievements. But in their quiet space, under the soft glow of fairy lights, they reminded each other of who they truly were. "You'll paint the world," Lena would say, glancing at Lucy's sketches. "And you'll write about it," Lucy would reply with a smile. Their dreams were different, but they fit together, like two halves of a story waiting to be told. It was in these late teenage years that Lucy and Lena began to understand. Their uniqueness wasn't a burden, it was a gift. Adulthood came softly, and yet all at once. One morning, Lucy and Lena stood at a bus stop in the city, their childhood now behind them, their futures stretching out like the tall buildings that towered above. Lucy clutched her portfolio case, filled with drawings she had carefully prepared. She had been offered an interview at a small publishing company that created children's books. Her heart pounded with nerves, her mind full of quiet doubts. Would they see her talent? Would they believe in her? Beside her, Lena sipped coffee and scrolled quickly through her phone. She had just landed an internship at a local news station, and her excitement bubbled out in every word she spoke. "This is it, Lucy," she said, her voice brimming with energy. The beginning of everything. The world around them seemed bigger now, full of strangers, full of questions, full of possibilities. And though they were still together for the first time, their paths truly began to separate. At work, people were often surprised when they introduced themselves as twins. "Really?" colleagues would ask, their brows raised in disbelief. Sometimes Lucy grew weary of explaining. Sometimes Lena laughed it off. But no matter the reaction, they carried the truth between them like a secret treasure. Their bond, their story, their shared heart. At night, when they returned to their small apartment, they would sit at the kitchen table, share their day, and remind each other of why they had started. Lucy with her sketches spread across the table, Lena with her notebook filled with ideas for articles. Though the city was loud and overwhelming, their laughter still echoed the same way it had in their childhood home. And as they stepped into adulthood, Lucy and Lena began to see clearly. Their differences had never been a weakness. They were, in fact, the very thing that made them strong. Adulthood, Lucy and Lena soon learned, was not only about dreams coming true, it was also about challenges that tested their strength. Lucy had taken her first steps into the publishing world, but the road was harder than she expected. Rejections piled up. Editors praised her drawings but told her she lacked experience. Nights found her sitting on the couch, sketchbooks open, wondering if she had chosen the right path. Lena, meanwhile, was working long hours at her internship. The newsroom was fast-paced, demanding, sometimes harsh. Her confidence was strong, but even she couldn't escape the sting of criticism. Articles she poured her heart into were sometimes dismissed or rewritten. She sat at the dining table late into the night, her fingers pressed to her temples, fighting off exhaustion. The apartment they shared, once filled with light and laughter, now carried the weight of their struggles. Bills piled on the counter, empty coffee mugs sat forgotten. The silence between them grew heavy, not from lack of love, but from the tiredness of two young women trying so hard to build their futures. One evening, after another long day, Lucy closed her sketchbook with trembling hands. "What if I'm not good enough?" she whispered. Lena looked up from her laptop, her eyes softening. She stood, crossed the room, and sat beside her sister. "You are good enough," she said firmly. "The world just takes time to see it." Lucy leaned against her, tears welling up. And for a while they sat in silence, holding on to each other. It was not the first time, nor would it be the last, that they would face doubt. But in that moment, they remembered what they had always known. Together, they could weather any storm. The world outside was difficult, yes, but inside that little apartment, their bond was still their greatest strength. Time, patience, and persistence slowly began to turn the tide for Lucy and Lena. Lucy, after countless rejections, finally had one of her illustrations accepted by a small children's publisher. Then another. Soon she was asked to illustrate an entire book. The first time she held that finished copy in her hands, her hazel eyes filled with tears. All the nights of doubt, all the quiet hours sketching alone, it had all been worth it. Lena's path unfolded differently, yet with the same determination. Her articles began to gain attention, first at the local level, then beyond. She wrote about stories that mattered, stories of people whose voices were often unheard. One day, her editor called her into the office with a smile. "Your work is being noticed," he said. "We want you to cover bigger stories." And so, there came a night that felt almost like a dream. Lucy was invited to showcase her art at a public event, her illustrations displayed on tall easels under warm lights. She stood quietly near her work, shy but glowing as strangers admired her drawings. Across the hall, Lena stood at a podium speaking with passion about truth, about storytelling, about seeing people for who they really were. Her voice carried strength, and the audience leaned in to listen. Different stages, different gifts, yet somehow their paths crossed in that same moment, both shining, both seen. From the crowd, people whispered again, "Are they really twins?" But this time, the question no longer stung. For Lucy and Lena knew the answer, and so did anyone who watched them that night. They were not just the different color twins. They were women who had worked, struggled, and risen, together. And at last, the world was beginning to see them, not just for how they looked, but for who they truly were. Years passed, as they always do. The little girls who once played with blocks on the living room floor had grown into women, into sisters who carried their dreams into the world. And now they sat together on a quiet park bench, watching the next generation run and play under the golden light of a late afternoon. Lucy's hair had softened into pale strands of silver, her hazel eyes gentle as ever. Her sketchbook, though, worn with age, was still her companion. She had filled her life with stories told through pictures, books now resting on the shelves of countless homes. Beside her, Lena still carried her notebook everywhere she went. Her curls, now streaked with silver, framed a face that had spoken to thousands through her words. She had traveled, she had told stories, she had given voices to those who needed them most. And yet, despite the distance life sometimes placed, between them they always returned to one another. Their paths had been different, their colors contrasting since the day they were born, but their bond had never wavered. As their children played together on the grass, skin tones ranging from fair to dark, laughter blending into one joyful song, Lucy and Lena exchanged a look that held every memory, every struggle, every triumph they had lived side by side. The world had once questioned them, doubted them, stared at them with curiosity. But now, as women who had carved their own places in life, they understood something deeply. Their differences were never a barrier. They were a gift, a reminder that love has no single face, no single color. Lucy closed her sketchbook. Lena capped her pen. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. And as always, they sat together, sisters, twins, forever bound by something greater than the world could ever explain. This was the story of Lucy and Lena, not just the different color twins, but two souls, one bond, everlasting.